Before I get started, I'd like to introduce my wife, Karen, who's been on this incredible journey with me. For the last 23 years. We left Atlanta in 1995 hoping that someday we would return, but never really knowing that it would ever actually happen. And so we've been on this 22-year walkabout where we've zigzagged across the country, I think now 4 times. And the opportunity to come home is both humbling and just an incredible end to a goal that I had many years ago. And most of you, I'm sure, have heard my story, which actually my relationship with Georgia Tech starts when I'm 10 years old on a beach in Florida. And I just happened to meet these guys that captured my imagination. They were football players from Georgia Tech, and I decided right then and there that I'm going to go to Georgia Tech to play football. That's what I want to do. And it didn't matter that I was from Oakville, Ontario, Canada, and I played hockey, and I wouldn't have an opportunity to play football till high school. But I had kind of set my sights on that's what I wanted to do. And so my journey to ultimately having an opportunity to come here on an athletic scholarship and playing football is is close to miraculous, but it's second to me coming back as your athletic director. To think that this journey started with a bunch of, and I tell you, I became enamored with those guys for all the wrong reasons. They were having one heck of a good time. And the ringleader of that group ultimately became my academic advisor while I was here, my mentor, somebody that's kind of helped guide me along throughout my career. In fact, the way I got into this business is he was head of academics and asked me if I wanted his job because he was going to LA to become a famous entertainment lawyer. And that's the first time I ever really thought about athletics as a career. So that kid, he was a kid, I was even a little kid, really changed the whole trajectory of my life. And everything that I've done throughout my career I can bring back not only to the beach in Daytona, but to this institution. And I thank God every day that they were Georgia Tech football players and not from North Dakota State or some other fine academic institution that I would have probably been equally enamored with at that time. I don't think a lot of people probably don't know this, but Karen and I were actually married in the athletic department, probably the only wedding ever to take place in the Edge building. And so when I talked to Scott, who ultimately became my in addition a friend and mentor, my lawyer, and it looked like this Georgia Tech opportunity was actually going to come together and happen. And I remember saying to him, I go, Scott, can you believe that this is really happening? And he said, his response was, we've only been working on it for 45 years. So, everything that I've done in my career is all rooted in what I learned here at Georgia Tech. And this is a quote that I've carried with me for probably 25, 30 years. I found it when I was here at Georgia Tech. And I think it puts into perspective what we actually do. And while the highlight films and the excitement that we have at our games, watching these incredible young people perform, the wins, the championships, the entertainment value of what we do is what actually most people, they think we're in the entertainment business. But we're actually in the education business. And I found this quote and it's from Pierre de Coubertin, and I think it's around 1912, which when he said this. But I'll read it, and it says, "There, incidentally, if you will allow me this parenthesis, is the whole secret of sporting education. Sport plants in the body seeds of physio-psychological qualities such as coolness, confidence, decision-making, etc. These qualities may remain localized around the exercise which brought them into being. This often happens. It even happens most often. How many daredevil cyclists there are who, once they leave their machines, are hesitant at every crossroads of existence. How many swimmers who are brave in the water but frightened by the waves of human existence. How many fencers who cannot apply to life's battles the quick eye and the nice timing which they show on the boards. The educator's task is to make the seed bear fruit throughout the organism, to transpose it from a particular circumstance to a whole array of circumstances, from a special category of activities to all the individual's actions." So this is not a new concept, but it is a concept, I think, that has become lost in education. And I think that as educators in intercollegiate athletics, we have an incredible opportunity. Because not only do we attract the most incredible young people who are the best of the best, we also have the leverage where they will still do what we ask them to do. We can push them to become more than what they think is possible just because they want to play a game. I came here for all the wrong reasons. I had no idea about the academic ranking, and of course at that time we had no facilities. Our weight room was outdoors. I mean, you know, sometimes we complain about what we got now, and I didn't meet a professor. I can't even tell you the establishments I was introduced to. So I came here for all the wrong reasons, but because I wanted to play a game, I was able to earn a Georgia Tech degree and get an incredible opportunity and a launch pad that has provided me with a total different life than I would have had otherwise. So at Georgia Tech, and like what I've said to, you can't hear me? Okay. And so, okay, now I get it. Woo! So much for this little thing we got here. Thanks, Mike. So with that, let me introduce my staff that keeps me straight and, you know, helps me kind of be able to do this sort of thing, and are really the ones behind the scenes a lot of times that allows all of this stuff to happen. So would the staff stand up and be recognized? And now the coaches. The coaches are the ones that actually make this quote come to fruition. They're the ones that find these incredible young people, get them to come to Georgia Tech, and then work with them for the 4 or 5 years that we have them to turn the skills that they get on this court or on the course or on the field or whatever in the pool and transform them into champions for life. And so would the coaches here please stand up and be recognized? Now, my first day on the job was a Georgia game in Athens. So all I've known since I've been here is a win against Georgia in football, bowl game, an incredible ride that ended up at both in New York City with the NIT and Detroit with the women's NIT. Boy, it's been a lot of fun so far. But over the last 5 months, and you've probably heard of my whiteboard for those of you that have been in my office. And this is a cleaned up version of what that actually looks like. And so what I've been doing is just trying to figure out, okay, where are we? What are we doing? What are we trying to do? And so over the last 5 months, I've met with every single staff member, 177 staff and coaches for an individual meeting to get their thoughts, their SWOT analysis on where we are and what we're trying to do, and so that I could get a good background and not just assume because I have one of our degrees hanging on my wall that I know everything. In fact, the one thing I know is I know about our DNA. I know about the Institute. I know what we stand for. I know who we are. But I don't know why we're where we are today. And so it was really important that I didn't just come in with all the answers, because I needed to know what questions to ask before I could even find the answers. So this is just an idea of all the things that have been running through my mind and how we're going to pull all this together and actually make some sense out of it. And all the names have been changed to protect the innocent, so it's been sanitized a little bit. But you'll see from that, you know, this started off as a total scatterbrain type exercise that happened over months. And then I had one of my former teammates who's a consultant from Covey come in and actually try and help me make sense of it all. And through all that, what that actually means is I've come up with, we have 4 strategic priorities. And this is the foundation on which we need to build this program. Because I believe that if we don't get this right, it does not matter. If we don't have our brand right, our culture, our structure, those 3 things are the foundational elements that we've got to have straight before we can do anything about strategy, strategic plan, those types of things. So as I look at our brand, I look at, or kind of what I've looked at is what sets us apart? What are our differentiators? What is special about Georgia Tech? And the beauty of this exercise was I have 177 people that helped me come up with what I think it is. And it's just not me in a back room wearing the gold-colored glasses trying to figure out, okay, when people see that GT, how do I want them to feel? There are a couple of things that I think set us apart, and the validating, it was incredibly validating to hear our staff, because to a person, 177 people led with, I love this place, I'm passionate about this place, I'm proud to represent the Institute because of what it represents. And what it represents is excellence in academics and athletics. And so as I look at our brand, there are things that cannot be duplicated by other programs. One is the strength of our Institute. And at the end of this, I think you'll see where we stand as far as our peers are concerned. We're in a strong conference. We're in Atlanta, Georgia. You cannot duplicate this institute and the power of this city in another place. Innovation defines us. We are Georgia Tech, so we have to be the center of innovation as it relates to sport. And so one of the things that I want to make sure of is that anybody with an idea that relates to sport comes to us first. The success of our current and former student athletes. You know, we're going to be defined on wins and losses and graduation rates, but our ultimate success and the thing that separates us from all others is what our student athletes are doing 5 and 10 years after graduation. And that's where we need to hang our hat, is what our student athletes go on to do and who they are and how incredibly successful they are. Jamie Weston, I'm not actually, we're not as a group working in a silo trying to figure out what our brand is. We're just fortunate enough that the senior vice president for branding and marketing at the NFL is one of our own. She's a former volleyball player of ours. And in my mind, just re-emphasizes the brand that we are. We could go out and hire a consultant to help us with our brand and go through that process, but the NFL actually does a pretty good job of branding. And as a senior VP of branding, not only do I feel like I've got the best, she's one of us. We don't have to explain to her who we are. Georgia Tech is part of her brand, her DNA. And so we're incredibly fortunate not only to have somebody in the position with the expertise that she has that I'm not going to have to pay for just because she loves this place, but she's also a poster child for what we're trying to say. That at Georgia Tech, we prepare our young men and women to be successful at the highest levels in whatever profession they're interested in pursuing. So this is our brand, our current and our former student athletes that are incredibly successful while they're here, and then this is just a launching pad for future success. Pat. Everybody knows, I'm sure in this room, because you're all old enough, everybody knows of Pat's incredible career as a football player. He, in fact, I'm always asked about my own football career, and good news is I was a teammate of Pat Swilling, and bad news is we played the same position. So I ended up playing a lot of special teams. Everybody knows about Pat's football and what he did as a Saint, but most people don't realize that he's multiple times more successful as a business person in New Orleans and was instrumental in helping rebuild that city after Katrina at a time when he could have gone anywhere. His career was over. He could have moved back to Atlanta. He could have done anything, but he decided to stay in New Orleans and help rebuild that city. And he is so much more successful doing what he's doing now than he ever was as a football player. And 11 years in the NFL and an all-pro and all the things that he accomplished, that's about as good as you can do. The difference between us and everybody else is that our pros, that's not the apex of their lives. It's just another springboard into a new career and the next part of their lives. And that's why guys like Calvin Johnson and Mark Teixeira can walk away on their own terms because they have other things to do. So this is our brand, our current and our former student athletes, and this is a story we have to tell. Harrison will probably be drafted, in the next couple of days. What a lot of people don't know is he's an industrial engineer, already graduated, an incredible student, well-rounded young man that, you know what, of course we want him to get drafted. But we know that that won't be the end of what Harrison does. And in fact, what he does as a pro is going to be phenomenal, but that will just be a launching pad for whatever he decides to do after his pro career. And then I love this one, because right now what we're doing is we're starting to catalog and interview and get the content on former student athletes, so that as we get our act together and how we tell the Georgia Tech story, the beauty is we don't have to make this stuff up. Georgia Tech is what it is. Our student athletes go on to do what they're going to do. And so this is one that I did not know about, a former swimmer and track and track runner. But you know what? That wasn't the apex of her career. She's an F-18 fighter pilot. I mean, we are producing incredible young people. And seeing some of the faces in here, you're also part of our story. We have a number of former student athletes in here, and I think that would be a great time to recognize them because you are part of our story, our brand. And so I'd like all the former student athletes that are here today to stand up and be recognized. Part of our brand is innovation, the history of Georgia Tech, and part of our DNA is innovation. And when I was here before, under the guidance of Dr. Homer Rice, we were the first at so many different things. The Total Person Program, which was the first in the country, we were the first athletic department in the country that actually put the student athlete first. And what Homer saw was how we could use the vehicle of athletics, because these young people just want to play a game, and actually give them the skills to go on and be successful throughout their lives. And I was in the first class of the Total Person Program, as well as, I don't know if Jeff's here, but another member of our staff, Jeff Kiesler. So last week before the spring game, it was Ted Roof, Jeff, Pat, and myself in my office, 4 old teammates, just kind of shooting the breeze. And Pat looked around, and of course, I've got a pretty nice office, thanks to many of you. It's bigger than some of the apartments Karen and I have lived in. But Pat looked around and he just said, "Would you look at us?" And that's the story. And what's so cool about Georgia Tech is we're not having to make it up because it's baked into the system. When you only graduate market-ready graduates that are either going into business or engineering, you're going to be more successful. You just are. We're ready to go once we cross the stage. And so the Total Person Program is designed to do that. And in 1993, it was adopted by the NCAA that actually made it mandatory for all programs in the country to have something similar, and it's called NCAA Champs Life Skills. We're the first to have a sport nutrition program. We're the first to have a sport nutritionist. Thanks to Drew Hearn, we were actually the first in the country to have an academic center devoted to student athletes. We were the first to have a sport performance center. We were the first to turn our training room into an outpatient clinic. We were using virtual reality in recruiting when I was here back in the 90s, because guess what? Georgia Tech was inventing virtual reality at the time, and I'd take recruits up on the hill into these labs. We'd put on the goggles and go up and down the elevator at the Marriott Marquis without ever leaving campus. I wasn't smart enough to realize we could do so much more with it than that. And of course now virtual reality and augmented reality are used by almost every school in the country to bring a campus to a young person in their living room. Neff Walker was a researcher here that was looking at training naval officers to basically coordinate the operations of the air, sea, and below the sea. And it was a way to train them on how to, you don't want to make a lot of mistakes when you're moving aircraft around. And we were working with Gary Croughton, who was the offensive coordinator at the time, to see how we could do something similar for quarterbacks. This was like 1992. Now, of course, those types of things are out there all over the place. When you think about it in football, if you're the player of the year, you win the Heisman. Coach of the year, you win the Bobby Dodd Award. And if you win the AD Life Achievement Award, you win the Homer Rice Award. The North Avenue Trade School, while it's been small, when I was here, 9,000, 10,000 students, the impact that we've had on intercollegiate athletics has been unbelievable. And when you look at all these firsts, now they're being legislated that you have to do it. And that's only happened in the last 2 or 3 years. And it goes even farther back than Homer. Because when Bobby Dodd was here and he offered you a scholarship, it was a scholarship till you graduated. And this was at a time when people were bringing in 100 recruits a year and finding 20 were left standing at the end of camp, and the rest had to go find somewhere else to go. So Bobby Dodd and Georgia Tech were guaranteeing scholarships to young people way before it ever became fashionable, way before anybody really even cared about student-athlete welfare. And just in the last 4 or 5 years, it's been legislated that now when we offer a scholarship, we have to be good for it until that young person graduates. Georgia Tech's been the center of innovation for a long, long time. And guess what? They're all great ideas. That's why they've been legislated. We can't sit on our laurels. We got to get back out in front. We got to find out what the next thing is. And so that's where I've basically worked with our staff as we look at how can we be innovative, how can we find opportunities to find new ways to do things and better ways to do things. And so it's in our DNA, it needs to be part of our brand. It is a differentiator. Culture. If we don't have the right culture, it does not matter what the strategic plan says. And so my staff and I are working on what kind of culture do we want, and what kind of place do we want to live and learn and work for or work with. It's obvious that our people are extremely passionate about Georgia Tech and representing Georgia Tech. But you know what? We had 40 plus people leave over the last 2 years. So one of the things I learned was there'd been a lot of turnover. Well, why would we want to train people for somebody else to reap the benefits of the incredible things that we helped them, skills that they developed while they were here? So developing a culture where we're invested in our people, where they know they're appreciated, where we over-deliver, where we're collaborative, where we're excellent, innovative, passionate, purpose, empowered, all those things. And at the end of the day, we're always student-athlete centered, because I think that, you know what, there's always a place that's going to pay more than we can pay. But if you are at a place with purpose that's focused on developing the young people that will change the world, and it's bigger than just what happens on the ticker, I think you can keep people. I think good people want to be a part of something like that, and that's why our people are so proud to wear the GT. And we got to make sure that they know we're proud of them. Aligning our structure. We got to have the right chairs in the right place and the right people in the right chairs. We need to build a foundation that will support long-term success. This isn't a place where I can just kick the can down the road. We got to get it right now, because I plan to live with my mistakes for a long time. You know, usually as an athletic director, you're looking at a 5-year deal. Okay, you know, I can kick this one down to year 6, 7. Someone else will have to pay for it, deal with it, whatever. Well, I'm hoping in year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, whatever, how hopefully long I can actually be here, that problem will be my problem. So we got to get our act together and straight on the front end. And part of that is making sure that we're aligned properly, that we're not bumping into each other, that we are working together, that we make sure that we're using the talents that we've got. And over those 177 meetings I had, we are so talented. We are so talented. And it's not just the day job. There's so many backstories that it's like, wow. We have an assistant football coach that's a 6 Sigma black belt. Now, who does that in their spare time? Let alone a football coach that's got a lot going on. And then I have somebody in AT that's a green belt. She's got some work to do. But normally we would have to go out, hire a consultant if we wanted to apply Six Sigma principles to how we operate as an athletic department. And I've got 2 Six Sigma professionals in our office right now that's not their day job. And we have all kinds of stories like that, of people that have expertise that nobody even knows about. I have somebody in compliance that was an ESPN producer. Nobody knew. I mean, we're getting ready to try and do this ACC network and all that. He may be able to help us in some of that. But this is, you know, second career, different life, whatever, but he still has that expertise. And so I found a lot of gems in those 177 interviews, or actually just one-on-one meetings, that I think are really, really going to help us over the long term. The other thing is we need to apply a metrics. You know, at the end of the day, I went to tech, I believe in numbers and all that kind of stuff. What are we trying to do? Are we aligned to do it? And how are we going to measure it? And again, we're not in a back room trying to figure this out. I'm fortunate enough that one of my teammates, roommates, a guy by the name of Sam Bracken, spent 15 years with Stephen Covey, has written a number of books on his own account regarding organizational change and how to get the most out of what you have. And so another tech guy that I would normally have to pay for that kind of expertise will be working with me, my staff, our coaches, and our student athletes to bring the principles of good management, structure, and culture to Georgia Tech athletics. And again, somebody that knows us, loves us, and he likes to say, and for those of you that know his story, it's unbelievable. When we speak together, he likes to say that Georgia Tech changed my life and it saved his. And so we're very fortunate to have him as an outside consultant, making sure that we keep moving in the right direction and get the chairs aligned in the right direction. Aligning our structure for success. One of the things, I showed you the brand. Obviously it'll get much more refined and we'll have talking points and we'll have it all down so we're all singing from the same hymn sheet, but I showed you the guts of what the brand is, and you all know that. I mean, we all know that. We all know what Georgia Tech is, but sometimes it's hard to explain it. We're creating an ideation team, and an ideation team is essentially an in-house ad agency who's not worried about game day, is not beholden to a particular sport. Their only job is to elevate the brand. And so they will be focused on the brand. What is Georgia Tech Athletics? What do we stand for? When you see the GT, how does it make you feel? So they will be the ones that will be telling the stories of our current and former student athletes and telling the stories that will differentiate us from everybody else and why we are such a special place. When I talk about metrics, you know, Stanford, I think, has done an incredible job of marketing. I would say a majority of all strong students that want to play athletics at this level all look at or have Stanford on their lists. We should be on that list too. And that is going to be their job. And I point over at Simit because Simit Shah will be assuming the role of helping us navigate and put that team together. And that'll include video, broadcasting, social media, all the things that most of us don't even know how to do, that these young people are totally into, and where they're getting their information, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Snapchat or whatever it may be. The ideation team will develop the stories, create the content, make sure it gets delivered, and then also provide our coaches with what they need when they're in that home, when they're talking to that young person, so that they have the ammo that they need to help them recruit the types of student athletes we need to come to Georgia Tech. Talked a little bit about innovation. Doug Alvine, who many of you know, he's been here for probably about 9 or 10 years, but in his previous life he was, I believe, 10 or 11 years as a consultant with Accenture. And so again, we got Six Sigma, we've got our own in-house Accenture consultant, and so I'm putting him to work to identify opportunities, whether it's research on the Hill or business opportunities in the startup community. How can we partner? How can we come up with the next Gatorade? How can we use our laboratory to create new opportunities that right now don't exist? And so that's going to be a major focus, and Doug Alvine will head up that operation. The realignment of our external staff to where we integrate tickets and and the AT fund, because they're joined at the hip. So they need to know what each other's doing. In fact, they need to be in lockstep with each other. And the ticketing operation needs to be just fill the pipeline, needs to fill the pipeline of future donors. Because that is our initial entree to people that we don't even know today. And with that, on the other side of that is aligning our marketing and our business development operations so that we are relevant in Atlanta, so that we are where we need to be whenever we need to be there, whether it's through our visibility on boards, whether it's making sure that we're aligned with the Midtown Business Alliance, whether it's where our student athletes are doing their community service. And so one of the initiatives there is we're partnering with Junior Achievement as one of our major service initiatives, knowing that all the things that Junior Achievement teaches, we want our student athletes to know, as well as being aligned with a service organization that has the support of the entire Atlanta business community is not a bad thing for Georgia Tech athletics and for us to be able to showcase our student athletes on the impact they can have in the Atlanta community. Because our student athletes look like Atlanta and can serve as incredible role models in communities that need them very, very badly. And so when we look at Atlanta, we're not looking at how can we sell a couple more tickets. We're looking at how can we partner with Atlanta? How can we help Atlanta? How can we be a player in Atlanta? And yeah, hopefully that will also bring Atlanta to our facilities, but ultimately, how can we be relevant? And it is our intention to make that a priority and not something that we're going to just assume because we're located in Atlanta, they know we're here. Because as many of you know, first time people have said on this campus, some of them, is for an Atlanta United event or an Atlanta Dream event. And so also, how do we use those opportunities to expose Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech athletics to our neighbors that may not know we're here or may be intimidated by us? That's the other part that we have to in some cases overcome, because Georgia Tech can be intimidating. In fact, when I tried to get Jeff to come back, Jeff, my teammate who's been with me at UCF and Oregon State, and when this thing started to come together, I said, Jeff, you ready to go back to Georgia Tech? And he goes, whoa, I don't know about that. We can be intimidating, even to our own. And so we need to find a way to bridge that. We need to make sure that the 5th Street Bridge is easily accessible for those on the other side of 75, as well as for our student athletes to cross that bridge, because that's where the opportunity is. The everyday champions, total person, you know, our student athletes are champions every day, not just game day. So how do we make that core to our brand? How do we make the total person program, what we do in developing our student athletes, the center of who we are and not an auxiliary enterprise? And that's something that we have to do because that's who we are. Revenue generation, I think it speaks for itself. And we can't do it the old-fashioned way. We got to find new ways, better ways. Of course, we got to maximize the revenue streams we have, but it's important that we continue to find new ones. Our financials. What you see here is kind of the breakdown in our budget. It's about $77 million. And I think what you see is that we have a lot of fixed costs. When you look at personnel and scholarships and how significant that is, sports operations, I think what you find is that 77 million sounds like a lot, but as a comparator, it puts us really in probably the bottom third of the conference. And I believe that we're $10 million away in operations of where we need to be so that we are in the thick of the conference. We don't need to be number one because I think we're pretty efficient and we're Georgia Tech. We find a way, but we at least need to be in the ball game. We need to be in the ballpark. And so what I'll say with this is our coaches and our administrators have done a phenomenal job. And it's my intention to give them the resources that they need to put us where we need to be. And that is, we need to be relevant in every sport and knocking on the door of championships in every sport. Because if we're knocking on the door of an ACC championship year in and year out, then that puts us in an opportunity to win a national championship. And we've been there before. If you're knocking on the door, sometimes the ball will bounce your way. And so that needs to be our priority, is how do we make sure that we've got the resources to recruit the kids that we need to recruit, to put us in a position, put our coaches in a position to be knocking on the door. Because as you remember, in 1990, a lot of crazy stuff had to happen. You know, I remember a Virginia Tech fumble at the end of their game. I remember some just crazy things that went in our direction that put us in a position to win that national championship. Now, we didn't need 5 downs to do it, but you see scholarship costs, about $11 million a year. Right now we're raising probably about $7 million, or no, we're about $7 million away. So when you look at $10 million, if we could just get to the point where we're funding all of our scholarships, that puts us $3 million away from that $10 million gap I think we've structurally got in the system. And so as we look at how do we grow the base, how, you know, and when you look at the numbers, we've got the bandwidth to do it. Georgia Tech alums have the bandwidth to close that gap. And so it's my intention to make the story compelling enough that some of those that aren't in this room will join us soon so that we can give the coaches and the student athletes what they need to make sure that every one of them are knocking on the door. And with that, I'd like to say and just recognize Coaches Harmon, Thorne, and Hepler, who are getting ready to go into, who all three are ranked, going into their conference championships, and all three are in positions to be knocking on the door and have been for a long time, and they are doing a phenomenal job. And so I just want to, one, recognize them, but two, wish them luck over the next couple of weeks because they're in the thick of the battle right now. Revenue. I think what you'll see here, 77 million. I think, as I said, I think we're about, $10 million that we got to find a way to close that. But a lot of this is fixed. And not only is it fixed, so something, as we all look towards the ACC network, which is going to generate more income, we're going to get exactly the same amount as everybody else in the conference. So while it's going to help us pay some bills that right now we may have struggle at paying or do whatever we need to do, it does not change the equation of where we line up. And so that's why when we look at innovation and new opportunities and new revenue streams that don't currently exist, we got to find a way around relying on things that are fixed. The ACC distribution, we got to have it to keep the doors open, and that's the ESPN contracts and all that. But know what? It's the same for everybody. And so some of the things that we're looking at are new business development. The first round draft choice program, which is a program that I created at UCF, took it to Oregon State, and I believe can be an incredible revenue stream for us here. And essentially what that is it's the evolution of the total person program. It's all the stuff I learned here before. But what it is it's a corporate partnership that's not built on marketing. There are some corporations that aren't trying to sell to the people that are going to be buying tickets here. So Lockheed Martin has no interest in, for the most part, a sign or your typical marketing, because not a lot of people are coming to the game saying, "No, I think I'm going to buy a F-16 next year," or whatever. But know what they do want? They want our students. They want our talent. And so how about a partnership that's based on a talent pipeline, where we ask our corporate partners not only what do you want in the future employees that you're looking for, but what if we actually had you engaged in not only helping us develop the programming that makes sure they have the skills that you say you want and need, but your executives will actually be engaged in delivering the programming, the junior achievement model. So that over the course of 4 years, you're going to know who your first round draft choices are going to be. And the value proposition is, we all know what a bad hire costs. And so if we can help limit the costs of a bad hire by introducing you to our best and our brightest, and you can test drive them for 4 years as you're actually involved in mentoring and developing their skill sets, you're going to know which ones you want. And so that's one of the things that we're in the process right now of developing is, what does that program look like? What are we going to deliver? Startup partnerships, I think we need to be just one big incubator. We've got 500 student athletes, 17 sports, at the highest level, whether it's a fabric, a wearable, a new way to train, a new hydration system, a nutrition system, you name it, whatever. Come talk to us. We have the best researchers and scientists in the world on this campus. Come talk to us, and maybe together we can create something that we could then sell to the rest of the league. Because we've come up with good stuff before. When I was at Oregon State, I was involved with 2 of our student athletes that had really good ideas, and I helped incubate their businesses within the athletic department. And one ended up selling his company to Learfield, and the other one is a storyteller. He created a production company, now is the outside production company for Nike and Pac-12 networks, among others. And I just wasn't smart enough to realize I needed to take a piece of that action. So what if we had an incubator that actually took a piece of the action? And not only that, engaged our student athletes in the whole idea of entrepreneurship and developing business and getting them engaged with their hands-on, and having a program where over the 4 years that they're here, for those that are interested, we help them get up and running so that when they cross the stage, they're ready to launch their business. So all this can work hand in hand, and I think really create opportunities for our current student athletes as well as our former student athletes. Because one of the things that I really believe is that our relationship with our student athletes needs to be lifelong, and that the Letter Winners Club and the Total Person Program need to be joined at the hip, because our former student athletes are our mentors, are our resources, are the ones that can get the attention of our current student athletes. And there are times when our former student athletes could also use those resources. We got the programs already up and running. So whether you're 22 looking for your first job or 40 starting your own business, you all have the same needs, and that's access to this incredible network. And so why, when they cross the stage, should we just say good luck? We should keep them embraced, keep them connected, continue to use them as resources, as well as help them throughout their careers. So as we look at philanthropy, and what do we need, and where our alums and our donors and our future donors and the community can come in and help us, this is what I've identified as the areas that we need to be focused on. Infrastructure. You know, Edge Rice, the Edge building was a phenomenal building when I moved into it in 1981. Not so much today. So we talk about excellence as being a priority. I'm not feeling it. So we've got some work to do. And in the short term, that means, one, elevating what we have, and if you've noticed when you're in there, there's a lot of blank walls that could be the canvas telling the stories of some of the people that we showed earlier, the Jamie Westons, Pat Swillings. We need to use those blank walls to tell that story, because that's our differentiator. And so we're going to go in there and we're going to, put some paint on that thing and upgrade it a little bit, and that we have, but ultimately we need to open that up. I mean, the days of me tucked away in the Taj Mahal in the back so that nobody can get to me. A lot of you are senior executives, you know that's not the way the world works anymore. We need to be open, we need to be visible, we need to be available, we need to be a team, we need to be collaborative, so we need to find ways to make that space more collaborative. And as we go forward, I want, when you walk into an athletics building at Georgia Tech, you know you're at Georgia Tech. And I want it to feel more like what you would find over in Tech Square or at Google or at Facebook than at what they're doing down the street. And so I want a decision by a young person and their parents when they are comparing us to somebody else. It's not apples to apples, it's apples and oranges. And if you need a waterfall in the bathroom and who knows what else they're coming up with all over the country, then you may want an orange. Because we're apples. And that means innovation center, maker space, high performance, everything focused on making you better, not just as an athlete, but as a human being. And you will notice the difference. Immediate needs. We need to do some things for as I said, we had the first academic center in the country for student athletes. Guess what? Everybody's got an academic center for student athletes. Some of them are, over the top. I mean, the University of Oregon has this glass cube in the middle of a wishing well or something like that. But, I mean, it's beautiful, but I can't imagine what they're spending on keeping those windows clean. But we need to focus on immediately on what do our student athletes need and what do the recruits need to see to know we're serious. And so, academic center, our dining facilities, I want that to be a gathering space. I want that to be a place where I want it to feel like Starbucks. I want it to be a place where our student athletes, our coaches, and our administrators go to gather, and our student athletes can use that space to read and work on their papers and expand the space that we have so that it's used 24 hours a day and not just for 2 or 3 meals a day. Ideation, I talked a little bit about that. We need to create creative space. They need to have white walls like I do, where they can come up with the craziest stuff ever imaginable and figure out how they can use their creativity to elevate the Georgia Tech brand. Every one of our sports has needs. In football, we need to get to the locker room immediately. You know, I'm sure it was state of the art when it was built, but nobody's standing still. The problem with intercollegiate athletics is nobody's pulling off to the side of the street and letting you pass them. And so if we're going to take it from them, we got to take it from them. So we've got needs everywhere that need to be, we need to do some things in baseball. We need to do some things. As beautiful as this facility is, there's already back office stuff that our coaches are having to recruit to that need to be addressed. And so that needs to be part of how do we keep this thing moving in the right direction? How do we take the excitement that Josh and Michelle have created over this past season and get some things done that they need? Scholarships and endowments and annual giving, I showed you. If we close that gap on the scholarships, that gets us close to being in the thick of things as far as what our budget looks like to those in the rest of the conference. And I'm going to tell you something. The ACC is not over the top crazy. You know, when you look at our budgets compared to some of the other leagues, we're actually, we're actually pretty prudent in this league, and it makes sense because you also look at the institutions that are in this league. So for us to be in the middle of this league is actually being very prudent and not over the top crazy, because we're in a pretty good neighborhood. And so there are just some things that we've got to do, but scholarship can go a long way. And so we need to find a way to expand how we can use our annual giving and our endowments to, one, make sure that all of our coaches are fully funded with the scholarships that they need, and that we're not using operations to backfill scholarships. So as far as our immediate priorities and what we're over the next 4 years focused on as far as raising money for scholarships, the whole brand development and execution, recruiting, we have got to be the best recruiters in the country, and that means people doing it, but they also need the technology to do it with, and we are Georgia Tech, so we should have the best technology. And we cannot give up recruiting to anybody, because the type of student that we have to recruit is very, very special. And the students that actually decide to come here are special the day they make the decision to come here, because there's so many easier roads to go. And the day that they choose Georgia Tech, they've decided that they're willing to take the Tech road, which isn't going to be the easiest road, but I will guarantee you that one thing, and I guarantee them and any recruit and their parents that I meet, the payoff is huge if you are willing to take it on. Student-athlete-centered facilities, academics, a nutrition center. We've got to ramp up that because it's tied to performance. I mean, sleep, working out, and nutrition, that's the trifecta of performance. And football locker room. I guess at this point I'd like to recognize all of our golden jackets, and I'd ask you to stand because you have brought us this far. And without you or other donors, we do not end up in the position we're in, which is knocking at the door across the board. So would the Golden Jackets please stand up? And I don't think, is Jimmy Etheridge here? No? Well, he is our newest Golden Jacket, and I wanted to give him special recognition, and the fact that we were former teammates gives me great pleasure that we're finally old enough to be Golden Jackets. So those guys aren't off the hook anymore. When I talked about peers, I thought I would, we put together a little list of these lists, you know, that you see in Forbes magazine and US News and World Report and all the different magazines. So we're going to run through a few lists, and I'd ask you to kind of look at kind of the neighborhood that we're playing in. So this is public universities. Best startup talent. Smartest public colleges. Money Magazine, Great Colleges for Business. Return on investment. Best startup talent. Most innovative. Best value. Essentially, we talk about peers. We have no peers. Because there was only one name that showed up on all those lists. When you look at our peers academically, they're not trying to line up out here and do what our student athletes are trying to do, or they're not lining up in Bobby Dodd trying to do what we're doing out there on the course or pool or whatever. And when you look at our athletic peers, they're not trying to do what our kids are trying to do when they're walking up that hill. So the combination of what we're doing athletically and academically puts us in rarefied air. There aren't any. And so that's why we have to find our own way and do it our own way and tell our own story, because our story, our recruiting story, our brand is that we have no peers. And so, you know what? Yeah, we'll hear that it's hard, but payoff is huge. And that's what puts us on all these lists. And when Karen and I we were driving across the country, and she said, oh, there was a list out. It was top startups, or top starting salaries in the country. She goes, do you think Georgia Tech's going to be on it? I said, well, how many schools are on it? She said, 25. I said, yeah, Georgia Tech's going to be on it. And she went down, started to go down the list. And, you know, it starts off with Harvard or Princeton and goes to Harvey Mudd and Claremont and a bunch of schools I've never heard of. And, you know, Carnegie Mellon, and Stanford's obviously in there. And then we were somewhere like 14 at 15, and then Duke was in there, and Notre Dame was in there. And so in the top 25, there were only 4 schools with the highest starting salaries that played athletics at the level we play at. And that was Duke, Notre Dame, Stanford, and Georgia Tech. Which one of these schools is even different from the other 3? It's us. And so we have so much to be proud of. And we don't have to make it up. We just have to tell the story. And so because of your success and those that have come before you and after you, we've got an incredible story to tell. And our focus is going to be on having the infrastructure and the people that can do that. So that when those great young people that can compete at the highest level in both athletics and academics, and they choose their 5 schools, we're always one of them. And that is a goal, and guess what? That's measurable. So we can even apply a metric to it so that we'll know when we get there. But anyways, I appreciate you coming, and of course I'll open it up for questions, and I know I've gone way too long, and before I go to questions, we've got a little a video, and then we'll go to questions.
So when you have the combination of people who love you, and when you have the greatest institution in the world to train your mind and to force you into a discipline that you would otherwise have never attempted, then you can't do anything but your best. You have no choice. And that's what Georgia Tech means to me. Hudson Mason has thrown for 194 yards. This time, passes, and it is intercepted! Intercepted! It's picked off! It's picked off! It's picked off! It is DJ White who intercepted it, and the Jackets have come into Athens and stunned Georgia in one of the best football games you will ever see.
My world-class education taught me a lot. It's just outstanding, the doors and the avenues that's been opening just because I walked up that hill and got a degree from Tech. And if somebody was to ask me now, Joe, 21 years later, would you do the same thing? That would be a resounding yes. Matter of fact, I wouldn't take any more visits. I would just say, Georgia Tech it is.
There's nothing like family. At the end of the day, when the sun sets, that's all you have. Ultimately, that's all you need.
When you look at the amount of money that was raised for the Athletic Association, it just shows the alumni buy-in to giving back. I'll always be a Yellow Jacket, and I'm proud to be able to give back.